Louder, closer. Can you hear me now? Awesome. So I am going to tell you a little bit of, oh, it doesn't fit in there, so I'll hold it. A little bit about myself. I'm going to talk about what the 13th Amendment is. So in 1865, the 13th Amendment read as this: neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime, whereas the party shall have the duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And what this means is that although slavery was abolished, still those that had committed a crime were considered slaves. So during the Reagan era, with his war on crime and his campaign with his wife's slogan, "Just say no to drugs," we saw that a vast majority of the arrests for African Americans were due to their use of cocaine. Even though whites, the use of crack. Even though whites had their habit of cocaine, they wasn't getting arrested like African Americans were. And we saw on television how hundreds and hundreds of African Americans were constantly being carted off to jail. African Americans actually spent more time in jail than their white counterparts. In 1985, the prison population rose. 759,000 people were incarcerated. When Bill Clinton was president in 1994, he passed the 21st Century Truth in Sentencing Bill. And this bill allowed for 3 strikes, you're out. So what this meant was if you had 3 felonies, you automatically were sentenced to a longer prison time, regardless of whether it was a low-level offense, whether it was a murder, whether it was drugs, whether it was a theft. You automatically were convicted for a longer prison sentence. Grassroots leadership had did a study they released the study in 2015, and this study showed that Travis County alone had a disparity with African Americans. They were in jail longer, they were sentenced longer, and the white counterpart didn't receive as much time as the African Americans did. So why is this so important to me? It's important to me because at the age of 20, I was sentenced to 75 years in prison. That was my first offense. I went for a murder, which I protected myself behind being raped. I was 4 months pregnant and I was being beaten. And when I was in jail, the judge called on my sentencing. He said that I was the most brutal and heinous person that he had ever met. And I was standing in front of him and I was telling him, my public defender, I was saying, look, I need to sit down. I'm 4 months pregnant, I'm a severe anemic, I have my hands on the bench, and when I removed my hands, you can see my entire handprint on the bench. And the public defender was telling the judge, well, she needs to sit down. She's not gonna make it through the sentencing phase. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know how much time I had got. When I woke up, I was in my jail cell. I don't even know how I got back to my jail cell. The guard was waking me up saying, Price, you had a visit. So I went down to the visitor room and it was my grandmother. And I said, Granny, how much time did I get? And she said, well, baby, I'm sorry to tell you, but he gave you 75 years. I was like, 75 years? This is 1985. I'm 20 years old. This is my first offense. It didn't matter to the judge that I was beaten, I was raped. It didn't matter. Only thing that mattered was he felt like I was the scum of the earth and I deserved to be in prison. I filed a bunch of appeals. I lost them. I filed clemencies. I lost that. I filed a post-conviction. I lost that. Finally, one of the judges said, you cannot be sentenced to 75 years for a first offense. And the reason the initial judge sentenced me was because he felt like I needed the extended term. So eventually my sentence was reduced It was reduced down from 75 years to 40 years, and I served 20 straight years in the penitentiary. Today, I am an advocate for criminal justice. I work at Texas Fair Defense Project as an intake specialist, where I now receive all the phone calls and respond to letters to persons that are incarcerated needing help because their public defender won't come and see them. Their public defender won't give them a phone call. They've asked their public defender to file different motions for them, and yet still the public defender is not representing them. For one, public defenders are paid regardless of whether they lower your sentence or whether you get out. It doesn't matter. A public defender is automatically paid, win, lose, or draw. So he really doesn't matter if the public defender says, let's play this out, and you're telling them, well, I'm innocent, I shouldn't got this much time, or I don't deserve this much time. It doesn't matter to a public defender because they pay one. And so my point is being, we all have to understand that the prison system that we have is corrupt, in my own opinion. I can't speak for everybody else, but I can say for myself, I think that if we all...
It's corrupt.
Okay, it's corrupt. It's corrupt. You know, people are incarcerated. There's innocent people incarcerated, and they're not going to get a fair shake. They can't afford to pay an attorney. I couldn't afford to pay an attorney. I think if my family was able to afford a paid attorney, I probably wouldn't have got convicted of a murder. It probably would have been an involuntary manslaughter. I would have did less than 5 years and would have been home, not served the 20 straight years. My kids grew up without me. We have a good relationship today, but I think that we need to realize that prison is just not the place to be. When I was in prison, I felt like a slave because I was shackled at my feet. When I went into labor, I was shackled around my waist. They didn't care that I was in labor. It didn't matter. Only thing that mattered to them was that I was a prisoner. And so they treated me as such, even though I was in labor. And so I probably could go on and on and on and say a whole bunch of stuff about prison. People feel that prison is this real nice resort, but it's not. You're told when to get up, when to go to bed, when to use the bathroom, when to go outside, when to eat, and what to eat. So that's why I say prison to me was like being enslaved. Another part of what I do today is that I'm a fellow for Travis County Reentry Roundtable. And my job there is to find better ways to help people when they get home. I'm trying now to get the barriers released off of apartment housing. On apartment leases, they say that you either have a look-back period of 7 years, or they have a disposition date, and a disposition date is the date that you are released from parole, not the date that you come out of prison. So this disposition date is also stopping people from getting on with their life after incarceration, because they have to wait till that period is over with. There's a look-back period that doesn't allow if you have certain crimes, if you have a DWI. Some apartment buildings here in Austin won't let you get an apartment. Grassroots Leadership has released this report from 2015 and discovered that here in Austin alone, more African Americans are incarcerated, arrested. More African Americans serve a longer time in jail than any other race. So I will employ everybody out here to talk to their congressmen, talk to senators, talk to whoever they need to talk to not only let these people out of jail, deal with them of why they're going to jail. And that's one of the things that I find that's really alarming, is that you lock people up for drugs, but you don't treat them. You lock people up that have mental illnesses, but there's not any mental counselors, mental health counselors, no kind of treatment for them while they're in jail, and then you release them and say, hey, you're free to go. And you're free to go to do what? You have nowhere to live, you have no resources, you don't have anything. And so I employ all of us out here, and those that are not out here, let's try to pull together and help end mass incarceration and help people before they go to jail, instead of trying to help them when they're in jail, when we all know that that doesn't work. So thank you all for coming out and listening to me, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Come on, we can get a louder applause for that. Up next, we have Jasmine Patel of Counterbalance ATX. Counterbalance has kindly been organizing the school supply drive. You'll notice that there's a nice big box of school supplies. If you didn't bring any today, you'll have a chance to drop some off at various area locations. She's also going to be speaking on behalf of Malik Washington. So I just want to introduce Malik to you for a second. Malik was the person who called for the round of April strikes that happened in Texas. And that's part of the reason that the September 9th, 2016 strikes were kicked off. Now, on September 9th, the unit where Malik was being held, 2 days beforehand, a guard went to him and said, if you even think about striking, we are going to throw you in solitary for so long, you will not remember what the sun looks like. So the guys decided not to lay it down, but Malik was charged with inciting a riot, and he was put in administrative segregation. He was moved to East Ham Unit, which is famous for toxic water, and he has been a strong advocate of the Amend the 13th movement. So Jasmine is going to be speaking both on her own behalf, on Counterbalance, but also on behalf of Malik. And if you like what Malik has to say, once again, we have some postcards. Send him some love, send Rashid Johnson some love. They both could use it. That's on the blue flyer if you want more information. Put your hands together for Jasmine, please.